And then there were 8. What a weekend. This definitely, I'd say, was even better than originally anticipated. Not all the games were really close at the end, but just having so much football, I think Super Wildcard Weekend was definitely a success. And we have a lot of interesting storylines going into the Divisional Round. So, for the Sunday action, Ravens-Titans starts it off. And there was a lot of anticipation for this game. You're talking about a playoff rematch, a really close, overtime game in the regular season. Both games won by the Titans. If you remember last season, the Ravens were the number 1 seed. Lamar Jackson was, MVP. And Tennessee knocked him out. So the Ravens really, really wanted this one badly. But Tennessee's had a really great season. They won the AFC South. They finished 11-5. And you knew this was going to be a very, very physical, competitive game. And it was. And Tennessee really got it going early. Thanks to A.J. Brown. He made some big plays, including a touchdown. Titans were able to get it to a 10-0 lead. Lamar Jackson threw a really bad interception. You're thinking to yourself, all right, well, maybe is Lamar going to mess it up again in the playoffs? Not quite. Not quite. He was able to rally the troops. I think the key, maybe even more than that, was the fact that the Titans could not get Derrick Henry going at all. And the Ravens sold out to stop the run, and it worked. It did. They said, all right, Ryan Tannehill beat us. And he couldn't do it. A.J. Brown was the only guy doing anything. I mean, Corey Davis didn't have a catch. And that game was there to be won. Like I said, in previewing this game, if the Titans were able to jump out to a really big lead, and 10-0 somewhat qualifies under that, but it was still early in the game. If they had kind of jumped into a 2-touchdown lead, something like that, maybe later in the second quarter or even going to the third quarter, and you're making Lamar Jackson throw the ball, the Titans really could have been in for some major success. They just could not do it, though. The Ravens defense really, really stepped up. And the biggest play of the game was the Ravens were down 10-3. Titans defense was playing very well. And really, you can't put this on them. Their defense, which has been really maligned all season, is not really getting good pressure on the quarterback and just really being one of the worst units in the league. They were not the problem here today. Lamar Jackson on a third down, there's pressure on him, but he escapes, and he was gone. Unbelievable, singular effort by Lamar Jackson. That was the play of the game where, he gets, it must have been a 50 or so yard rushing touchdown for Lamar Jackson. And it just kind of happened like out of nowhere almost. It was like he wasn't doing a whole lot, and then boom, he's gone. And that's just, you don't see that. That's that type of sort of wow moment that you get from Lamar Jackson. And I don't want to say from there it was lights out, but the Ravens were definitely in more control of the game. And a big play that just sticks out to me was Mike Vrabel not going for it on 4th and 2 when the Ravens were up 17-13. Now, this was after Justin Tucker missed the field goal. So, okay, you're getting some momentum. They're still in the game. A touchdown takes the lead. And he decides to punt. And I just didn't really understand that in that moment. There was some time left, but it's getting late early. And he didn't go for it. And what do you know? A few plays later, Ravens have a couple big running plays, and they're already back to that same 40-yard line, just like that. And, they would eventually get a Justin Tucker field goal. He would redeem himself. He would get a 50-yard field goal to put him up 7. And the Titans obviously just couldn't do anything today. It wasn't in the cards. It wasn't pretty, but this is like Ravens football. they were able to hang around. The defense really did their job, and Lamar Jackson made some really big plays. So, the Ravens, I think, are a team that you don't really want to see right now in the playoffs. They are ascending at the right time. So, and we're gonna put a bow on the rest of these games. We're gonna go in chronological order of how they happened, but originally we thought that it was going to be Lamar Jackson versus Pat Mahomes, but not so fast. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So the second game of the day, the Bears versus the Saints. So this was the last NFC game. And whereas in the AFC, the Colts were the 7th seed at 11-5 and played a really competitive game against the Bills. That's your reason for including an extra team. And I know it goes beyond that. It's all about TV. It's all about money. That's the reason. That's why the reason that they added those extra teams is for Super Wildcard Weekend. So you could have 3 games on each day instead of 2. But from a competitive standpoint, the Colts, that's why you want to have that extra team. On the flip side, the Bears, that's why you don't want to have that extra team. This is not a playoff caliber football team. Not even close. They stayed competitive for the first half. It was 7-3 at half. In fact, Javon Wims, Bears receiver, who got ejected for throwing a punch during the season against New Orleans, has a chance to kind of right those wrongs, and he drops a easy touchdown in the end zone. A perfect throw from Trubisky, a bit of trickery. So, good play designed by Matt Nagy, and did not work. And that felt like that was their big opportunity. And there was, again, some questionable decisions in this game as well, where Nagy, he had 4th and 4, and it would have been about a 52, 53-yard field goal, and he decides to go for it, and they were down 7-3 at that point. It didn't work out. I've seen just a lot of weird decisions by coaches in these playoffs. It's kind of perplexing. But the Saints played just a very solid brand of football. And really, if not for a Taysom Hill turnover, they played close to perfect. The defense was really excellent. Again, it's against Mitchell Trubisky. This is not, by any means one of the better quarterbacks in the playoffs. Might be one of the worst. But this was a game that they should have won, and they won handily. Michael Thomas is back healthy. He looked good. Alvin Kamara is back from the COVID absence. He was looking good as well. So not a whole lot to take out of this game, and the right team advances. And so in the NFC, it is going to be the Packers home against the Rams and the Saints home against the Bucs. We'll do a full preview after we discuss what was the biggest shocker of the weekend, and that would be the Browns at the Steelers. And I think that we can't underestimate the impact of divisional games. So, when I was predicting these games at the time, originally, before I knew about the fact that Kevin Stefanski was going to be out and that a lot of key starters were going to be out for the Browns, I thought, this is a tough one to peg. I think Pittsburgh will win just based on the history, and I kind of felt the same way with Seattle against the Rams. I felt like I'll give those teams the edge. They, there's just a little bit more there in terms of just head coach history and teams that have won Super Bowls and that sort of thing. But I knew that those were tough to say because of the fact that they're so used to each other. And in both cases, they played those teams, in the Seahawks-Rams case, the second to last week of the season. In the Browns-Steelers case, the last week of the season. And if you're the Steelers, maybe you should have... I'm not saying... It's not that they didn't try in that last week. They did, because they lost by 2 points. But they didn't go with Ben Roethlisberger. If you had beat the Browns, they would have been out of the playoffs. So, you kind of didn't take them fully seriously. Now, I understand they wanted to get Roethlisberger healthy. So this wasn't like an Eagles situation, of course. They were looking out for the future in terms of what they could do in the playoffs, but that was a costly one because now the Browns played them and they absolutely annihilated them. The game was basically over from the start. And who would have thought? The Browns have, in 17 tries at Heinz Field, have lost. Roethlisberger's career numbers against Cleveland are immaculate. Everything told you Pittsburgh's going to win this game. And the first snap over Roethlisberger's head, Cleveland recovers it in the end zone for a touchdown. And so you're thinking, maybe this is going to be different. And it just continued and continued. Roethlisberger throwing interceptions. Cleveland running the ball. Throwing the ball. Doing anything they wanted. They were up 28-0 in the first quarter. Yeah. This was something like we've never seen. This was just over from the start. And Pittsburgh was in complete comeback mode. So Roethlisberger's final numbers are insane. Like 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, like 68 pass attempts, just record stuff, but because they were losing by so much. And they almost came back. And they scored a touchdown to put them down by 19. Now, the smart move would have been just kick the extra point. Go down by 18, so that if you get a touchdown next time, then you're down by 11. They went for 2. They didn't get it, so they're still down by 19. Then they get a touchdown the next possession, and they kick the extra point, so now they're down by 12. Didn't quite understand that. And then Pittsburgh's defense was absolutely terrible. So they're down by 19 again. Pittsburgh gets a touchdown, and then they go for 2 because they want to go down by 11, and they miss it. So I don't like, to me, just a lot of bad decisions, but that wasn't even the biggest problem. Mixed in all of that, they have momentum. They're down by a couple of scores. The fourth quarter begins. It's 4th and 1 at probably about their own 40 to 45. Nothing, you're down, you need to score. You're moving in the right direction. And Tomlin decides to punt. It wasn't as bad as, I'd say Vrabel's was worse, but these were not good. And of course, Cleveland immediately drove the field. It didn't work. Your hope in that situation for Vrabel and Tomlin is, all right, we're going to punt. We're going to try to pin him deep and get that field position back. And it didn't work. It did not work. So, just incredible stuff. Baker Mayfield with his first playoff win, and that 2018 draft featuring Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, all on to the next round. But that was pretty shocking by how much it was. But look, Pittsburgh was trending down. This was a team that was 11-0, and they got knocked out in the first round. You just don't see that. I mean, in most cases, like, those teams will at least get a bye. Even if it had been the old rules and the first 2 seeds got a bye, they were the 3 seed. They would have still played in the first round, and they got spanked. Embarrassing. And so, Ben Roethlisberger, we have to run through what his future is. He's just not the same anymore. And it's like Seattle, I don't know, it's different situations, but just Seattle and Pittsburgh, maybe something has to change there. And these are good teams, but there's just something amiss for me as I see it. So, if Seattle and Pittsburgh had won, those would have led to some really, really epic second-round matchups. But now, you're looking at 2 matchups that are really, really good still. And then 2 that, while interesting and have some storylines, aren't quite as juicy. So, really quick, if Seattle and Pittsburgh had held serve and won their games, you would have had games of, and I've made mention this plenty of times, but just this will be the last one. Kansas City versus Baltimore and Buffalo versus Pittsburgh. And in the NFC, you would have had Green Bay versus Tampa and New Orleans versus Seattle. Just great across the board. And with that being said, Seattle and Pittsburgh, they don't deserve it. See you later. They shouldn't be here. So now, in the AFC, Kansas City is hosting Cleveland, and Buffalo is hosting Baltimore. So, one thing that kind of came to mind, it's in the AFC, you have Cleveland and Buffalo, two teams that had not won a playoff game in a long, long time. Since the mid-90s. So, obviously that would not be anyone's idea of a sexy AFC championship game, but it would be kind of interesting that one of those two teams would be making it to the Super Bowl. And I think that within the game itself, I'll get into predictions. So Saturday night is going to be in Buffalo. I got to think that's going to be, really, really cold. Maybe we'll get some snow. We'll see. But Baltimore at Buffalo, that's going to be one of the two really interesting games this weekend. And I'm going to be rooting for Buffalo. No question about that. I'd like to see them win. If I had to give a prediction, I think that Baltimore is going to win that game. I don't feel that strongly about it. I'm going to predict Baltimore wins that game. I think they have something going on here where last year was such a letdown with so much on the line. And Buffalo is a team that is really strong. Josh Allen is very, very good. And I think that this team has a really bright future. But I kind of think that Baltimore is just on a mission. And I cannot wait for that game. That is an excellent, excellent matchup. And has all the makings for a great down-to-the-wire finish. The other AFC game, you have, I guess, the upstart Cleveland Browns coming off a really big win against Pittsburgh at Kansas City. And I think if you're a Kansas City fan, you have to be happy about this. Like, if you're Buffalo, I think that the Cleveland-Pittsburgh result is upsetting. I think you would have liked to have played Pittsburgh again. They had just beaten them a few weeks back. I think that would have been a better matchup. This works out very well for Kansas City. I don't think Cleveland is going to be ran out of the building, but I have to predict the Chiefs here. The Browns, it was great that they got over this hump. And I think when I'm going to be watching this game, I'll probably find myself in some ways rooting for the Browns. It's just easier to kind of root for that upset. Even though I think what my prediction is, and that's Baltimore, Kansas City, that is just the quintessential AFC championship matchup that I think everyone would want to see. Now, if it were Kansas City, Buffalo, the 1 versus 2 seed, that's a good one too. That's a really good matchup also. And then I guess the other combo, I mentioned Buffalo, Cleveland before, kind of the two teams that have, not been good in a long time. And then I guess the other one that would be interesting in a different way is you have Baltimore versus Cleveland, an AFC North rivalry, and a rematch of the amazing, maybe game of the year, Monday Night Football match between those two teams. So kind of anywhere you go, it's fun. But Kansas City, Baltimore, Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, that is, CBS is rooting for that. And CBS got screwed because their one game this weekend is going to be Kansas City versus Cleveland. So Jim Nantz and Tony Romo going from the Saints and Bears to Chiefs Browns, they kind of got an unfortunate draw, but CBS is getting the Super Bowl this year, so they can't complain too much. But I think that we were robbed of Mahomes versus Jackson this week, but you may just get it in the next round. Shifting to the NFC. So, and I've talked about, in particular, the Bucs and how they really handled the Packers this year, but also, on the flip side, were terrible against the Saints in 2 games. So, the Rams and the Packers. So, whereas the Chiefs versus the Browns, I think the Chiefs will win that pretty easily. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be a complete blowout. I actually think the Rams, they're going to be able to stay in this with Green Bay, but I'm not going to predict that they win. I think with Aaron Rodgers against either a banged-up Jared Goff or John Wolford, it's tough for me to see them going to, cold Lambeau Field. They do kind of have that run the ball with Cam Akers, stuff the run with Aaron Donald, and you have Jalen Ramsey to lock down Devontae Adams, maybe. That's going to be an amazing matchup, by the way, Adams versus Ramsey. So I would not count the Rams out. This is a weird team. And another thing, just because, got to bring the Jets into this. The Jets beat the Rams and the Browns, 2 of the final 8 teams. Just let's kind of think about that for a second. But the Rams are a team that is capable of beating good teams. So I like Green Bay to win this game, but I do think that Sean McVay will come up with a good game plan. I haven't been blown away by the Packers this season, but it is a good team, and it's a better team than last year's Packers. So now I think this will be the most anticipated game of the weekend. It's the last one. So the Packers versus the Rams, that's going to be the first game. That's going to be the Saturday 4:30 game. And now the Sunday 4:30 game is going to be the Bucs at the Saints, Brady versus Breeze. And I guess I'm torn because the Saints really they played well against the Bears. They played really well against the Bucs in the regular season. And it could go either way. But, I've been predicting these games, and I just think I don't think that they're going to be able to do it 3 times. There's something, Tom Brady, it's going to be a lot to overcome because it was really bad. I'm going to predict the Bucs. I think they're going to win this game. And it's, of course, again, I don't feel strong about. But I think there's a lot of parallels in both leagues. And what's funny is that you had, of course, the 1 seed advances to the second round with their bye. But then also, you had the 2 seeds take care of business. You had the 5 beat the 4 in both cases, with the Ravens winning and the Bucs, and then you had the 6 upsetting the 3 in the two divisional matchups. So there was a lot of symmetry in both leagues, and I kind of think that the Bucs and the Ravens, I put them in kind of similar categories. Again, teams that didn't win their division, but they're trending in the right direction. I don't know, those teams I see in a similar light. Totally different strengths and weaknesses on both teams. But I think that they are going to go on the road and win both of their games. And those are going to be the really good ones. While the 1 seeds are in matchups that are more favorable. The Packers get to play the Rams and not the Bucs. The Chiefs get to play the Browns and not the Ravens. I think that they'll take advantage of those opportunities and hold serve. And we're going to see the NFC Championship game at Lambeau Field and an Arrowhead Stadium for the AFC. So, yeah, I'm excited. These are going to be good games. I think that it's also going to lead to potentially really good championship round games too. And who wouldn't want to see, and this is dependent on the Packers winning. If the Rams win, let's just say, you do get that Rams-Saint rematch from a few years ago with the controversial no call, the no pass interference that led to the Rams winning. So, and it would be back in New Orleans. So there's that storyline. But the better thing is Aaron Rodgers against either Drew Brees or Tom Brady. And now that Tom Brady's in the NFC, we don't see Tom Brady versus Drew Brees. We don't see Tom Brady versus Aaron Rodgers. And even Aaron Rodgers versus Drew Brees, that has been Packers and the Saints in the playoffs. It's happened. But if it has, I shouldn't even say that for sure. It's been few and far between Green Bay versus New Orleans in the playoffs. I can't even say with full certainty. In fact, last year, we were going to get that, but New Orleans lost to Minnesota. That was going to be the 2-3 last year. But maybe we'll get that now. But either way, just an potentially epic quarterback matchups. And on the NFC side, you got the veterans, and the AFC, the younger quarterbacks. So I think that this weekend saw everything. You know, some good games, some really questionable decisions, and some upsets. And we'll see what's in store next week. I just think that when it comes to, what makes a winning team, really successful, you always go back to who is the quarterback. And because of poor play from Russell Wilson, because of poor play from Ben Roethlisberger, beyond bad defense, because that's, of course, huge in this as well. We don't see that many good defenses. I feel like the Rams may have one of the better defenses remaining, and that's what's kind of keeping them alive. But that's going to be the key to this. And limiting the mistakes. And it's all, I know it's a lot of cliche, but it's true. That was the theme of this weekend, obviously. And Cleveland played a very, clean game. Sure, their defense didn't play great, but when you're up by 4 touchdowns, naturally you're going to sit back a bit. So there's Cinderella story possibilities. There are, quarterbacks that might end their career. Drew Brees, it seems like this is it for him. This is his last hurrah. So a lot to look forward to for next week. And I'll talk to you guys soon.